Hi, I'm Jim Kellett. Join us as we take a look at the people, personalities, activities, and destinations of Colorado, right here on Colorado Outdoors. In today's show, top-ranked ultrarunner Diane Van Deren will share the story of the great strides required for her to become an ultra-running competitor. We'll look at some of the gear that will keep you comfortable on the trail, and we'll talk to some running clubs that can help you get started in the sport. The standard definition for ultra-running is anything past the marathon. Many of the races are 50, even 100 miles long, and the racers don't stop. They run continually for hours, sometimes even days. Diane Van Deren is a resident of Douglas County, Colorado, and a top-ranked ultrarunner competing in the world's hardest 100-mile races. In 2003, she was the women's overall winner of the San Diego 100-mile endurance event. At the Sistina, Alaska 100-mile race, she ran in temperatures 30 degrees below zero. She placed second in her age group at the Tour de Mont Blanc, the longest and most difficult race in Europe, and took 8th place at the Hardrock here in Colorado, considered to be the hardest 100-mile race in the world.
Hardrock 100 is known as the world's hardest ultra running race. It's 100 miles, and it's 100 miles through the San Juans. This is where we get to test everything we've put together, all of our training, all of our time, all of our effort, and see if we can put it all together on the days of the race. And what we'll be doing is testing ourselves against not just the elevation, but the altitude. And really and truly, to do a race like this for me, I mean, everybody's different, but for me, I don't think about the whole 100 miles. If you think about 100 miles, that to me is just way too overwhelming. And what I do is I break the race down. And I think of more of the race in either 10 or 15 or 20-mile increments. What I think about is I got a job to do. I just got to put one foot in front of the other. I got to keep moving. I got to just think about eating and drinking and keeping my body in balance, and also pacing. So when you're running through a race like this, what goes through my mind? Once again, I think about each aid station. I break it up, and what am I going to do to get to that next aid station? What will I do after that? And so I just break it up into increments. But as that sun goes down, it starts to get dark, then you're starting to think, you're starting to kind of gear a little differently. Because during the daytime, you can move faster, you can see ahead farther. I mean, your vision, there's a lot of things that come into play that are different. Your body's more relaxed. And as you go through the night, you tend to tighten up probably a little bit because you are a little bit more tense about your footing and where you are. And in this race, in this case, there are some drop-offs, and you're gonna have to be alert at all times. So there really isn't a time to get tired. I mean, you might get sleepy and kind of quiet and things like that. Going through the night, it's just a matter of you have to do it, and you just keep moving through it. The hardest part of a race, I don't know if hardest is really the word for it. I truly believe if you don't have a passion to do this, if hard is a word that you're thinking, then really this isn't something you should be doing, because it really should be a passion. A lot of these people that are here running just enjoy being in the outdoors. We enjoy being in a group. We love pushing our bodies to the elements and above and beyond. It's just if you've trained right come race day, you shouldn't have a hardest part. You should just getting through it will be a great challenge.
How you feeling?
Oh, I feel great.
I had the opportunity to run a 100-mile race on the Iditarod Trail in February. What I basically had to do is I had to pull a sled with 28 pounds of mandatory gear. The North Face was wonderful enough to supply my shoes and my clothing and everything that I needed in order to compete in a race of that extreme of elements. It was 30 and 40 below. You know, you cannot do this type of racing if you don't have the proper gear. And if I don't have gear out there that doesn't work, you're not going to continue. You know, a race like this, people ask how much is physical and how much is mental. I truly feel that Races like this are more mental than physical. So I'd say mentally, you have to be more prepared. That probably takes more of a beating, is pushing yourself, having your confidence, being able to perform, and being in the zone. I talk a lot about being in the zone or flowing, where you can be out there and almost be subconscious and just keeping yourself moving. And how do you get to that state? You go through an extreme amount of variations through the course. And so really to explain it to somebody, it is hard.
Perseverance, determination, and a lot of training are required to compete in an ultra run. Diane will tell us about some of the obstacles she had to overcome and where she finds her strength.
I was very fortunate. I was one of the top athletes in Colorado. I was a state champion in golf, top basketball player in Colorado. I eventually became the state champion in tennis, so I ended up leaving high school early and played professional tennis. And while I was on the pro tour, I was realizing that I was having these funny sensations. They were brief and they were quick, but I thought everybody had had these sensations. Well, those continued, and I threw a grand mal seizure. And so as I had the seizure, went to the hospital and was with doctors numerous times, back and forth through my pregnancy. And about 7 months into my pregnancy, I was in bed. In the middle of the night, I started seizing again, and the eyes were at the back of my head, and I was biting my tongue, and Scott called the ambulance. And ambulance came out, went back to the hospital, and met with another doctor, another neurologist. As we were sitting down at that point, he said, "Diane, we need to put you on medications. You're having seizures." So I opted for medication at that point in time. And as the years continued, I continued to have more and more seizures. And the seizures got worse. And I went from doctor to doctor to doctor. And finally, there's the Epilepsy Foundation of Colorado right here in Denver. And the executive director, I talked with her, and she got me in touch with Mark Spitz. So Mark sent me off to have an MRI done, and we met the following week. And as he took the slide of my MRI, put it up into the camera with the lights on the back, and he was showing me the different parts of my brain. And he pointed to this one spot on my brain, and what you could see was a small scarring on my right temporal lobe. And he said, "Do you know what you have?" And I said, "Mark, I have seizures. I don't know what that means, but they say I have seizures." At that point in time, Mark said, "Diane, what you have is epilepsy." None of the medicines worked. I always either had allergic reaction or the side effects were too severe that they didn't control my seizures. And at that point in time, Dr. Spitz said, "Well, Diane, there is this brain surgery that's available. Because of the scarring on your brain, you might be a candidate for this type of brain surgery because your seizures might stem from one spot in your brain." And the very first test that I had to have done was called an EEG monitoring test. And this was a point in time where they wanted me to go into the hospital and they wanted me to have seizures. They literally sandpapered each one of these little electrodes onto my brain, taped them down to my head very tightly, and they put me into a room. And I was hooked into a 5-foot cord, and this cord was hooked into a television set. And what this television set was showing what each and every one of these electrodes were doing on my brain. I remember laying there, and then I got that funny sensation that I talked about that I had for years. It's called an aura. And I always had a premonition or aura before I had a seizure. It was the first time I didn't fight it, and sure enough, a couple minutes later, I came out of this horrendous seizure. And I remember there was blood coming out of the side of my mouth. I had a horrendous headache. I was in this heavy labored breathing, and I was exhausted. I remember Dr. Spitz, he was there at my side when I came to and came around. And I remember him looking at the TV screen and looking at every one of my brain waves that were coming from each of my electrodes. And all of a sudden, Dr. Spitz, he puts his fist up in the air. "Yes, we got it." And he said, "Diane, your seizures come from one area of your brain. They come from that spot on your brain from when you had scarring as an infant." And as he was looking at that film of me seizing, I said, "Dr. Spitz, I need to see what my children and my family saw for years." And he replayed the film, and it showed me having a grand mal seizure. And I remember laying there in bed just thinking, oh my gosh, this is what my children and my family and my friends had to see. Now I understand how they felt the way they did. Well, you know, I had my last seizure the night before my surgery. But because of the brain surgery, I am seizure-free, I am off medicines, I am living this wonderful life, but now I deal with the brain injury. Organizational skills are difficult, time management, my short-term memory's been impaired. I've lost vision from the surgery. I struggle daily with where I need to be, where the kids need to be, what do I need to do. But would I do it again? I'd go again tomorrow. So what I do is I use my legs as my words. And that is why I run these 100-mile races. Because when I get an opportunity, I run these races and I win them or I do well, it's not about, wow, look at me. It just gives me an opportunity to talk about how we all have trials and tragedies in our life, and how do we deal with those. But I had the opportunity last June. I ran my first 100-mile race, and I ran for a period of 31, 32 hours. And once again, sleep deprivation and stress are the #1 triggers in seizures. So as I'm running through this race all night, all day, and I remember running to that finish line. I remember going over the line. I didn't have a seizure. I placed. But as I finished that race, the Epilepsy Foundation asked if I would come talk to the kids at Snow Mountain Ranch. We send 10 to 20 kids every year who have severe epilepsy. And what motivates me, whether it being just myself and my children and my family, was as I'm talking to these kids, I was telling them, don't ever let a doctor tell you you can't do something. I said, you can. You might need to do it differently. If you want to swim in the ocean, you take somebody with you. There is nothing you cannot do. And we're all sitting around and we're talking, and one of the girls said to me, her name was Mandy, not only do I have seizures, I have cerebral palsy. I can't run. And Mandy looked at me and she said, will you do your next 100-mile race for me? If you do another one, would you do it for me? And then all the kids said, yeah, would you run races for us? And Diane, would you run races and tell others that we're normal? Just because we have seizures, we're not any different. We don't want to be treated differently. If only these kids knew what they gave me. And so, you know, I signed up for another 100-mile race 3 weeks later. And I did another, and I did another. And in November, I ran a 100-mile race in San Diego where all the fires were, and I won that race. But when I was on that mountain, all I could think about were those kids. So what motivates me, it's not just myself, it's the children I work with, and I'm trying to teach others that there's not limitations. Limitations is what we put on ourselves. And that is a story that I'm trying to get out on how we all have obstacles, how we all have trials. So that's why I'll continue to run and continue to do what I'm doing. I think to me, you don't realize how fortunate we are until something's taken away. And my health was taken away. And it's every morning I just get up and I say, thank you, Lord. It's a gift. Every day is a gift. And you just learn to appreciate life. And because of what I've been through, I've learned that. I used to take life for granted. I was invincible. I was this great athlete. And now that I've been through my epilepsy, my brain surgery, I've really learned. And what I want to tell people is how important each and every day is.
If you would like to get into running or compete in some races, a running club is a great way to get involved. The Rocky Mountain Roadrunners have over 500 members and provide year-round group training, fun runs, and trophy series races.
We have training runs like this on, Tuesday evenings at Wash Park, Saturdays here at the Highline Canal at the Coven, and it's just a great opportunity for people to get together that love being outdoors, that enjoy meeting one another and talking about their next race. And I think one of the other good benefits is that we all are thinking in terms of personal goals. We all have half marathons or whether it be an ultra or a trail race that we enjoy doing. And frequently they involve travel, and so a lot of times people will get together and book their flights together in their hotel rooms. And last weekend there were about a dozen of us that were up at Grand Junction doing the Rimrock Run through the Colorado National Monument, and it was just a stunning place to run, and it was just a fantastic time. I would say we've got people that run as much in the 10, 11, 12, 13-minute pace as we do people that run in the 7, 6, and 5.5-minute pace. Whether you're a good runner or just getting started, it's a great organization to join because there's people of all different abilities. For an individual membership, it's $30 a year. For a family membership, it's $40, and that's for a 12-month period. And that's pretty much it. The monthly races are free to members. If you're a non-member, it only costs you $5 to race with the group, so it's very, very nominal. Also, another benefit of membership besides the raffles and the monthly races, would be the discounts that members get at the area running stores. They get a 15% discount at area running stores, which would include, Sporting Women, 2 Feet to Go, Runner's Roost, and Boulder Running Company.
When the weather turns cold, staying comfortable on the trail becomes more difficult. Next, Diane Van Deren will tell us how she stayed warm during her race in Alaska.
Well, in order for me to compete in 100-mile races, I run through rain, I run through snow, I run through heat, I run through rivers. There's many elements that I endeavor when I run in these races. So some of the clothes that I wore when I did this race in Alaska was, I obviously started with long underwear underneath. That was the first layer that I had. And then I had on top of that, I had a pair of insulated pants and also then a shirt here that's heavier that would also wick away the sweat from my body. So some of the things, I've got the Gore-Tex top here and the Gore-Tex bottom. This is totally windproof, waterproof, and keeps my body warm. I wear these gloves that North Face puts out. It's a lighter version of what I could wear during the day in cold temperatures. And at night, then I would switch to a Gore-Tex glove, something that's heavier and something that would keep me warmer as the elements drop. Also, the shirts that I wore, I had a long sleeve polypro shirt here that would wick away the sweat from my body. The hats, I would bring a couple hats in case one of them got very wet. I always bring a couple of each item that I bring in case of wetness. So these hats that I wore were windproof and waterproof also. Now, one thing I did do when I was in Alaska is I changed my socks a lot. I needed to have good socks that would keep my feet dry on top of the Gore-Tex shoes that I wore. Now, this Gore-Tex shoe that North Face puts out was actually voted one of the top trail running Gore-Tex shoes by Outside Magazine. It's a wonderful performance shoe, but it does what it says. It keeps your feet dry, and it keeps your feet comfortable from blistering in other aspects. Brightness out in Alaska is so bright, you definitely need to have a good pair of sunglasses. So I would usually wear my light sunglasses during the day, and then if it was snowing heavy or I needed more protection on my face because of the coldness and the sun, I would have to put on a ski goggle. And then whenever I would be running and would have to get something to drink, I couldn't carry the water outside my body because it would freeze because of the conditions. So I carried my water in these containers, these insulated bottle containers. And I put my water in the Nalgene bottle and then put it in this insulated covering, which would keep it from freezing. So every time that I had to stop and get a drink, I'd have to pull off the trail, open up this container, drink the water, and then I would go ahead and put it back in and continue. But as I pulled off the trail, what I would do is I would throw on a down coat, because as you stop, your body temperature drops so quickly that I had to keep warm. And then as soon as I finished eating and drinking, I'd throw it back into my sled and then I'd continue in the race. Believe it or not, I did run for a period of 45 hours straight. I did not sleep, but I did eat and drink. But it was continuous movement, and I really couldn't stop for a long period of time because the body would get so cold. So as long as I kept one foot in front of the other, I continued moving, I continued eating and drinking, I knew that I had a good chance at finishing this race.
You can find information about the Rocky Mountain Roadrunners at rmrr.org. For more information about epilepsy, log on to the Epilepsy Foundation of Colorado's website at www.epilepsycolorado.org.